All right, hello everybody. This is Chad Morrison again. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Miss Christina Clark Rehfuss as we do our interview on Standing in the Gap with Chad podcast. And I'm tickled to have her here with us today. I'm truly blessed to have all of these candidates sit down with me and give you and I the opportunity to kind of get a one-on-one who they are, what they stand for. So thanks, Miss Rehfuss, for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Chad, and I commend you on pronouncing my last name correctly.
I've struggled with that. I have.
If people remember, it's long E, and just forget about that H because it's silent.
Gotcha.
Rehfuss, they'll get it every time.
Good deal. So I really, again, appreciate you sitting down. I wished that I could have had all of the Commissioner of Revenue interviews back to back. I mean, I guess I could have flipped a coin, but I really didn't know who was going to go along with these interviews, so I'm just trying to fit them in. And it's took us a few days to get to where we're at. So thank you for being patient with me. And if you're ready, we'll start with the questions. Okay?
I'm ready, Chad. Thank you.
All right. So the number one question that I ask, and you already know what I'm going to ask, is, are you a Christian?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question. Yes, I am a Christian. I mean by that I follow the teachings of Christ, and that I do believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and that He did make a choice to come here to this earth and go through the things that He needed to go through in order for us to be saved.
Right. Can you kind of highlight how you came, your testimony, how you came to know Christ as your Savior?
Well, I grew up in a community where the church was very important. I grew up here in Washington County in the Tyler district. My family went to Willow Branch Baptist Church.
Heard of that.
Way down in the holler. And that was going all the way back to my grandparents and my great-grandparents.
Okay.
And I attended that church for many years as a child. And we had a pastor named Bud Crusenberry.
I've heard of him.
And about a year or so after he started preaching there, I particularly tuned in to what he was saying. And of course, I was getting a little bit older. And I was I was 13 years old. And it wasn't a revival or anything in particular. It was just, I think, a cumulative time, me listening to the gospel and it being spoken to me that there was an altar call, which there always was on Sunday, and I answered the altar call.
Yeah.
And from there, I became quite active in the church, singing in the choir, all those kind of things that you can do. And I've had times that I veered away from the church. I think a lot of people have had that experience, but I always came back to my roots.
Yeah.
And I think it was the same summer, that summer I turned 13, that I was actually baptized. And I was baptized in the Mendota River.
Okay.
And my father's family was from Mendota.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of weekends in Mendota. Learned how to fish there, baptized there, and playing in that red clay mud with my cousins, much to the chagrin of my mother, because it's hard to get out of clothes. But I have been a Christian, as you can tell, for a long time.
Good deal. I was baptized there at the River Bridge at Hyder's Gap.
Get out of here, really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's something.
And,
it's an experience that you'll never forget.
And what's really funny is my grandfather, Paul Stanley, which has been a local preacher, pastor for decades here.
Yes.
The pastor here at Grace Tabernacle, my papa actually baptized him.
Isn't that funny?
In that exact same place, that little pool right there in front of the church at the bridge. That's where baptisms were.
Well, a few years back now, probably about 5 years, maybe even 6. My business partner, he grew up in Bristol. He was born in Bristol, Connecticut, which is funny. I'm born in Bristol, Virginia.
Yeah.
And him and his wife, they live in Naples now.
Okay.
And they brought a little church group of young people up to Mendota, and I kind of worked to arrange that. And they came up and they helped doing some painting at the community center, and the little church down there. They cleaned it up and they redid the sign and stuff like that. And during that particular visit, my business partner actually got baptized in the Mendota.
Okay.
And I can't even tell you how many tears
Right.
I cried that day, because to me it also felt as though he honored me
Yeah.
as a Christian, because he knew that that's where I was baptized.
Right. There's a lot of, and I guess this is kind of getting off topic, and I'll try to not dabble too far, but there's a lot of things that you lose from a national, when you let that national vision kind of sneak into the local parts, there's things that you lose. I got no real problem with big churches, but there's a lot of history that gets lost when you go from a little church to a big church.
Yes.
And one of those things that are lost is old time river baptisms.
Oh, yes.
That's just something special to experience.
Yes, it absolutely is.
All right, so I really don't know your background. I saved
Okay.
all of that for this video.
Okay.
So tell us what makes you capable, and what's your background? Where did you come from? What did you study?
Okay.
What makes you capable of doing this job?
Well, I was born and raised here in the Tyler district. I'm the daughter of a sharecropper that grew tobacco. It took us many years to be able to save up enough money to have our own small farm. I am a graduate of John S. Battle High School. Go Trojans! And I also am the first person in my family to go to college.
Nice.
And I went to Berea College in Kentucky, and people call that the poor man's Harvard, because it's very geared towards kids from the mountains that don't have the financial means to go to college, but has the ability. And Berea College, I got 2 bachelors there.
Oh, nice.
One in history, and one that might surprise you is in theology.
Really?
So
Okay.
when you ask me if I'm a Christian, it is something that has always been something very important to my heart.
Yeah.
I actually, in the work study program that they had in Berea, I taught, I was a teaching assistant my last 2 years, and I worked and studied the Old Testament.
Okay.
So, I mean, we probably have a lot in common that we
yeah.
could probably talk to after this interview.
Yeah.
From Berea, I won a HUD fellowship, and I was recommended by the dean of Berea College, and I won that HUD fellowship to go to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Okay.
And I studied I got my master's in public administration and urban planning.
Wow.
And now also, not only did I have the 4 years of working at Berea College, but when I was working on my master's, I worked for the East Tennessee State Regional Planning Office.
Okay.
And they did, like, circuit riding preachers used to go around to the
Oh,
different
yeah.
churches. Well, I was a
Robert
circuit riding planner, because, you know, a lot of the small counties there in East Tennessee, they really didn't have the money for their own planner. So
Right.
when they had big projects, they would contract with that office, and
Okay.
we'd get to go out and help them. Got to work on Dollywood. We can talk about that afterwards. That was one of the
Dollywood
funnest things.
or Silver Dollar City?
No, it actually was Dollywood.
Okay.
Dollywood
Okay.
project.
Now I'm telling my age.
And I got to meet Dolly, so that was
Okay.
a wonderful experience from a girl coming from here and
Yeah.
being in the mountains. I came back here with 3 degrees and work in the field, and I wanted to try to get a job here, because I always felt, Chad, that I was extremely blessed to be able to be given the opportunity
Mhm.
to go and study, and then also the opportunity to get the job skills. And I want to come right back here and help, you know, the people here.
Home's just home.
Well, and then, you know, the district I grew up in is one of the poorest districts here in the county. And so I know what kind of struggles that the people have. So, but I was not blessed with being able to get a job here. In fact, I was met with a lot of like pushback, where they would not even give me an application.
Wow.
And it was heartbreaking on some levels. But, you know, coming from a sharecropper's daughter, we really didn't have the money for me to even think about not working. And I certainly never in my life thought about not working, because it's just when you grow up on a farm, you
Yeah.
always work. So I was able to go to my husband's hometown in Florida, and I became a city planner there. And that kind of got my career started.
Yeah.
And so I've been a whole lot of things now. I've been a city planner. I've been a community development director. I've been an election official. I actually have worked on the board with the Federal Election Commission.
Mhm.
They did the first standards for electronic voting systems.
Okay.
From there, I was recruited by the third largest election company in the world at the time, and I was blessed then to go to work for them, spearheading their voter registration and election management software division. And I traveled all over the country and the world, and I felt like that I was giving back to my country.
Right.
You know, it was my way to help promote and support democracy not only here,
Mhm.
but abroad. And so I've had a very wide gamut of experience. 15 years ago, I started my own company, and it's doing election software. And I was able to come back home in 2011. My parents were getting sick and they needed support. And so I was able to come back home, which truly was one of the greatest blessings of my life. And I took care of both my parents as primary caretaker until they passed. I continued to work with high-speed internet
Mhm.
that allows us to be able to do those kind of things now.
Yeah.
And I have been on the Washington County. I was appointed to, after my parents passed, you know, when you're a caretaker, you don't have a whole lot of extra time.
Right.
But once my parents passed, I started getting involved in community organizations that I thought really had a positive message to the people and really gave positive help and support. And I was involved with WIN, Washington County Independent Neighbors, and also involved a lot with Virginia Organizing, which gives the people a voice. And from there, I was appointed to the Washington County Planning Commission. I am the only planner currently in VN that has actually done planning,
Right.
worked in the area of planning. I was appointed, I've been there 7 years, so I was appointed by Saul Hernandez and reappointed by Saul Hernandez. And so it's my 7th year, and I've also been on the Board of Zoning Appeals for 3.
So, two things. One is a point that I think that you will agree with me on, but this is more for the audience than it is for you.
Okay.
We always seem to forget that it's the hard things in life, the problems, that teaches us more than the good things. We learn more about failures. There's so many areas of our life that failures actually help us grow in.
Mm-hmm.
So to that point, leaving here and having that kickback really only makes you stronger to be able to go somewhere else and say, okay, this is where God wants me, and I can learn by my failures there. Papa Stanley always said failures isn't a bad thing, it's just a lesson in how not to do something.
Exactly.
Secondly, you said something that I'm very curious about, and maybe we don't dive into it too deep now, but for my own personal gain after the fact, elections.
Yes.
That's an important thing that a lot of people are concerned about.
Yes.
I'm old school. I think it's pretty easy if you've got a driver's license to show your driver's license.
Yes.
I just think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we've come into an era, and I try to look at everything from a common sense standpoint, not necessarily this side or this side. Common sense. I have reservations about drop boxes. You know how secure they are.
Mm-hmm.
How do we fix election voting and the whole 9 yards to where the country can feel good about it again?
Well, I think, Chad, that it's like a lot of things in our life. The more that you understand it, the better and more secure maybe you can feel. Now, for me, when I started working in elections, one of the big things that happened during that time was the Gore, Bush, hanging Chad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working in elections in Florida. So basically on the front lines of that.
Yeah.
And that's how I actually ended up getting my appointment to the Federal Election Commission.
Right.
It's because of the job that I did. And of course, we were in the national limelight then.
I remember.
Well, what we discovered was that there was still a lot of room where we need to tighten things up.
Yeah.
Where we needed to cross those T's and dot those I's.
Yeah.
And I am very proud to say to you that I have worked 30 years in that field, and I've seen it tighten and tighten and tighten where you have accountability. Where you have, for instance, if you have two people doing things, you have two people of opposing parties doing it together.
Yeah.
Where everything is documented, everything is tested before, during, and after. Where you have different ways of checking and double checking things for consistency. And I think that if we, you know, a lot of times, how do I say this? It's easy to criticize something if you don't understand it. You know what I'm saying? Because
And that's
it's
why
out of
I asked,
ignorance.
because there's so much we don't understand.
Yes, behind the
So
curtains.
behind the curtains, like you
So
say.
it's perception. A lot of
Yeah.
times it is perception. And for me personally, working in elections all these years, I was extremely proud of how our elections went.
Mhm.
And then our elections were challenged in a way that they've never been challenged.
Well, Florida got a lot of kickback in their elections,
Yes.
and they went from almost the worst to one of the best systems of elections. And I'm like, where's the rest of these states that are, well, we'll do it our way? Well, I mean, Florida proved that they could do it,
Yes.
and
But
quickly.
But there's a couple of sides to that. And as an election, a former election official, and actually I guess a current election official, I can speak to, is a lot of people say, why don't we just have the same kind of voting system everywhere? Well, that sounds like a good idea on the surface. But when you allow variety, and I'm talking about systems that go through certification testing,
Mhm.
so they're certified and they're tested, and it's I worked on those kind of testings, and let me tell you, it's very gruesome kind of thing tests that they go through multi-days and all kinds of things.
And you have to think of ways how
Right.
to try to make it fail.
Yes. Not only does allowing a multitude of voting systems allow us to let the free market operate, they still have to meet certification, right? But it also gives such a variety and diversity in the way that people cast their ballots that it would be darn near impossible for someone to steal a whole election.
Right.
Because you've got too many things that are incongruent,
Yeah.
you know.
To do that, you'd have to have multiple platforms.
And multiple
systems.
conspiracies, and so, but my read of the American people is, we're not like that.
No.
Deep down, no matter what party you are, I think people really do have a strong sense of integrity.
Most.
Yeah.
I won't say all.
No, well, you can never
Most.
say all, because, you know, that never fits.
Okay.
But yes, I think most of the people that I come in contact with, they just want it done correctly and accurately.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a bonus question for them because I didn't know that you did that.
Right.
So we both learned something, or we all learned something here. Okay, so
I actually thought about doing a blog on elections.
you should.
Just so that
You should.
people can be educated, because a lot of things that people fear, once you shine the light on it, there's not a lot to be afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so tell me your perception of what you think the job, or is the job to do with Commissioner of Revenue.
What the job by state statute is?
Yes.
Is that where we, okay, we start there. Well, the Commissioner of Revenue is the chief tax assessor of a county, and that's how it's lined out in the Virginia statutes. Basically, anything that's taxable, that's what the Commissioner of Revenue's office would oversee. Now, that does not mean that the Commissioner of Revenue has free reign over assessing your taxes.
Right. That's contracted out.
Yeah, well, the assessment of property is usually contracted out
Okay.
every 4 years. That's correct. There are some places where the Commissioner of Revenue's office would have a little bit more leeway in how those things are done, like with car values and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
However, the state of Virginia pretty much tightens that down. But what you do, and probably one of your most important roles, is that you serve the people of this county.
Right.
It's customer service and taking care of their needs. So say when the assessments come in, that people do not feel that those are accurate, there is a procedure and a process for them to go through in order to get that evaluated, to make sure that it is fair and accurate. And the commissioner's job is to make sure they facilitate that and give the best service they can and help people in every way they can. And there's a lot of different things that Commissioner of Revenue's office also does that people don't ever think about. For instance, and I'm sure you probably know this now because you've interviewed other candidates, but the Commissioner of Revenue's office, that office is mandated to help people file their state income tax.
Yes,
Wow.
I did hear that. And
Wow.
I mean, before these interviews, I had no idea.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing, there's a lot of working poor in this county. People work every day and they live paycheck to paycheck, doing the best that they can. But they may not be comfortable doing their own taxes, so they'll go down to an HR block or
And they want it to
somebody.
be done right.
Well, yeah, they want
know-
to be accurate, but
Yeah.
sometimes they don't quite understand. They're unsure about it. So they'll go and they'll pay someone to do their
Yeah.
taxes. Well, you're talking nowadays $300, $400, $500, $600. Now, wouldn't it be great if you could get the Commissioner of Revenue's office and their staff to help you with your taxes free of charge,
Yeah.
right? And if you have a problem with your taxes, then we're supposed to support you also in getting that rectified.
Wow.
Now, isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is.
So one of the things that I propose as Commissioner of Revenue is during tax season that we have tax workshops. And I'm not talking about you have to come to Commissioner's Revenue's office. I'm saying take it to the people. Go out into the community. Do it in community centers, at the fire stations, wherever.
Just like take a
Even
day to
church,
go.
wherever the best place is,
Okay.
convenient to the people. And then they don't have to pay that money to file their taxes and to do their taxes, and they can take that money and they can buy groceries or they can pay the light bill or whatever they need to do with it.
Right. I think it's a good idea. I mean, figuring out a way to do that, that's not mine to have to figure out, but I immediately like, how do you do that? Because I guess maybe
And they change it
Take
every year.
take a couple people to go to a place,
Yeah.
like kind of like Walmart has the setup outside sometimes,
Right.
and they send one or two people just to go do that.
Yes.
Anyways, my little
And if
brain.
you've done your state taxes, it's very similar to your federal.
Right.
So you can pretty much feel like you've done them both.
Right, good deal.
Hint.
Yes,
Wink, wink.
yes. Okay, so tell us, and please, if I'm wrong, bear with me.
All right.
You're running as the Democratic candidate.
Yes, I
Okay.
am. Yes.
I'm sorry.
No,
After
don't apologize.
after 12 interviews and calling multiple people a day, I'm losing track. So you're running as a Democrat candidate. This is a question I know that you've heard me ask other people, but I think it's a good question to ask. Where do you see that you fit in that political spectrum?
Okay, that's a very good question, by the way, and I really found it interesting listening to other people's response to that. I am a Democrat. I have been, ever since I registered, I was raised as a Democrat, but I have to say that I do not 100% align with the National Party.
Right.
I don't think that I really 100% align with anybody, except maybe Jesus Christ. I try to, because I'm an opinionated person and that kind of thing. But I always joke, especially this kind of a joke between me and Saul Hernandez. Saul Hernandez is a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
He is the supervisor in my district, and he is the one that actually appointed me to the Planning Commission at once and then reappointed me. And I would say over the last 7 years, there couldn't be maybe 2 or 3 things that we might have had a slight disagreement on. Much can be said about him in that he never pressured me to vote either way.
Right.
But what the joke always was is I always say, I'm a moderate that leans left, and you're a moderate that leans right, and we can always meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And we generally do.
Yeah.
And it's,
But that's important for, and you may have heard if you've watched some of these other interviews, that's one thing that I've tried to really push in this is, from a national perspective, looking at it on a county level, I would like for Washington County to be the spokesperson, the spokes county for how Virginia could be.
Yes.
Because when you get above Roanoke and you get up around Richmond and these cities,
It's very divisive. It's very divisive.
It really is, and it doesn't have to.
No, I 100% agree with that. I've been, like I said, on the planning commission for 7 years, and I have a great track record for working across the aisles. And I've had that question from other people that ask me, well, how do you work across the aisles? Well, first of all, it's kind of an alien kind of question to me because I never see it as an us or them. I always see it as a them.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's easy because what I would answer to that is the way that you work with someone that might have different opinions than you is that I listen to you, you listen to me. And the more we talk, the more you will find that we have in common.
I can remember speaking to that. I can remember I grew up on Wendell Road.
Oh, yes, okay,
So
yes, very familiar.
We used to walk up to Shorty's store.
Yes.
And you'd walk up the railroad tracks. Yes,
Yes,
we
yes,
did
we did
that.
it.
And we had railroad ties for a bridge.
You have to be Gen X.
Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah. So we would go over there and we would trade pop bottles for candy. And Shorty always, because he loved my papa's family,
Right.
we would always end up with more than the bottles was worth. I mean, we was kids. We didn't really get how much we were getting, or understand how much we were getting. However, he just was that way. But I can remember so many times listening to old fellers, old farmers sitting out there on the bench arguing.
Me too.
Over politics and this and that. But tomorrow they'd be in the field when one of them broke down. The other one would be there to help them. And they may argue on things, but it didn't change their perspective of each other. And I kind of see parties kind of like a marriage. I'm not going to get all the answers right. My wife is not going to get all the answers right. But it's important that I listen to my wife.
Dialogue, that we have a dialogue.
That's
yes.
it. That we can, because she's going to show a perspective that I'm not going to see. And she's going to have the same thing with me. I'm going to see or show something that she hasn't seen. So it's important that we work together. And it seems like that's such a lost thing today.
It is, but I think that early in this interview, when you were talking about the fact that we can be an example, we being Washington County, is that we can show our fellow countrymen how to be neighbors again.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important. And that, you know, I told you that I had gotten involved with Washington County Independent Neighbors. And the premise of that was that we can leave politics outside the door and we can come in and we can sit down and we can talk about issues and we can throw everything on the table and
Yeah.
see what works.
Absolutely.
And I wholeheartedly embrace that.
Yeah. And we've kind of already hit on this question, but I'll just kind of throw it out there.
Yes.
We usually end up hitting on these questions without actually asking a lot of these questions, just a conversation. We really just answered this question, but the question was, how do we, with the division in the country, how do we come together? We really just answered that question. But I just want them to know that that question has been asked and answered without really going into it.
Yes.
This is another question that I'm still kind of bumfuzzled about. Yes, that's a word. It may not be in the dictionary. But
I speak Southwest Virginia.
okay, good. Because I do too.
All right, we're good.
I told one of the kids on my school bus from Ray Valley years ago, or some of my kids, they said, Mr. Chad, you really speak 2 languages? And I said, yeah, I speak English and bad English. And lo and behold, we had a young man who had something in his mouth and was kind of, but I knew what he said.
Yes,
so when he got off the bus and they left, they were like, Mr. Chad, you really do speak 2 languages. Sorry. So, why do so many people want this job?
Well,
4 candidates.
there's a lot of candidates. This is a very crowded race. There's 2 incumbents, and then there's a Democrat nominee and a Republican nominee. I think that it is important to point out that neither of the incumbents received their party's nomination. And I think that points to something that may seem that some people may not be as pleased with the way that the jobs were performed.
Mm-hmm.
That is my contention, and our way of showing that is generally at the ballot box.
Right.
Now, I can tell you why I would like to be in this position, but I really can't speak for anybody else. Now, for me, I feel like my whole life has prepared me for this job. You know, I often wondered growing up in the tobacco field, you know, my father could not read and write. My mother only went to the 8th grade. Not that that is that they weren't intelligent. They were quite intelligent people. They just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of times it's not how smart you are or the skills that you have. It's about opportunity. But
for most old timers, the field and taking care of their family
that was their education.
Priority
Yes.
over actually going to school.
Yes.
And my grandfather, I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt, my grandfather didn't learn, he actually went into the Army. He was drafted in, I think, 53 or 55 and couldn't read or write.
Yes.
So they sent him to dumb school.
Yes.
He still couldn't read or write, but he learned to sign his name.
And that was good enough, probably.
That was good enough, but he didn't learn to read or write until he was called to preach, and my mama would read the Bible to him, and then he would read with her.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
how he learned.
My father too. My father was a very religious man, and you know, the kind of man that you meet, and when they pray in church, they're so humble that it brings tears to your eyes.
Right.
You know, and I always envisioned my father being a very similar man that Jesus would have been.
Right.
You know, someone hits you on one cheek, you turn the other cheek, and how that takes so much more strength. But for me, I always wondered, you know, why do I have these interests? You know, why am I interested in history and politics? And you know what I mean? I'm thinking, where did I get that, right? And I just think that, you know, God always chooses people and gives them gifts.
Yeah.
And it's not always maybe the sharpest pencil in the box or the person that you think should be, but it's the person that can do it. The person that God knows that they can depend on to do it. And I feel like with the education that I had, which is geared toward how to run a public office, and also my work experience, that I have gained a tremendous amount of experience in a variety of different fields. And I think that when I looked at this office, I felt that this office needed a change, and I thought I could be the positive change.
Okay. All right. So, I know that, I've learned with this job, there's a lot of things that you kind of have your hands tied about. But what are some ways that you can think of? And I know you mentioned one, but with the community struggling, inflation continuing, I know that you were talking about filling out state taxes into the public. Is there any other areas there that you can think of that would really help the citizens of Washington County?
Well, I guess this goes to the beginning of what I believe in and what I support. And I absolutely 100% support programs that are designed to help people like the elderly, the first responders, our veterans, the farmers. And of course, you know, I have to have an affinity with farmers, considering I grew up a farmer's daughter, and I currently do farming myself, which I very much enjoy now. Can't say so much always, but as a child I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I have an affinity for that. I support our land use program. And I understand that there are people that need to have some assistance. And I will be diligent in looking at other ways where I can help those groups that need it. But I am absolutely in no way for supporting tax breaks for people that can afford to pay. If it is accurately assessed and they can afford to pay, I think they should, because I do not believe in welfare for the wealthy.
Right.
Because when you work in the Commissioner of Revenue's office, it's a very fine line that you walk. You are the chief tax assessor in the county. Yes, your hands are tied in many, many ways because Virginia is under the dealing rule. Okay, so you only have the ability to do what the state tells you you have the ability to do.
What they grant you.
Right. But this is one thing that I offer that I think that people and voters should think about, is that I am a very creative, out-of-the-box thinker. And I plan on doing my due diligence not only to find ways where we can offer tax breaks to people that deserve it and really need it, but I'm also quite aggressive in trying to find other revenue sources and other sources of revenue. Because being on the Planning Commission and being able to observe our Board of Supervisors, I realize the task that it is in order to be able to meet the needs of the people of this county. And that every tax dollar collected not only should be used wisely, which I am very proud of a lot of the decisions, most of the decisions I would say, of our Board of Supervisors. But we need to make sure that we maximize that also so that we can provide the better roads and better schools and better pay for our teachers and clean air and clean water. So it's really a balancing act. But I think because I have had a variety of experiences in other localities, both here in the States and internationally, that I might have another way, I might have fresh eyes of looking at things. Right. And I am very much positive about finding opportunities to help both of those spectrums.
Good deal. All right, so this has already been kind of asked and answered. I'll throw it out there and hit on a little bit, but it's kind of already been asked and answered. What are some things that you think still need to be done in this role if you were elected? And again, you've kind of already hit on that, but I'll throw it back out there.
Well, actually, there is something that we haven't talked about that I do feel quite strongly about. And I do support the separation of church and state. Now, I'm a Christian woman, and you cannot separate me from my faith. Mm-hmm. But I do strongly believe in the Constitution and the way that it was written. And I think the people that wrote the Constitution were very wise people. They actually had come from other countries where they were forced by their government to worship in the way that the government told you, the Church of England, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I think they were very deliberate in making sure that they put that in there because they most likely felt persecuted for their faith. Now, one can say, well, we're Christians, and most people here in Washington County, by percentages, we are more Christian than any other faith. That is true. However, things change, and we have to be wise enough to understand that things do change. And how would you feel if you were being forced, even though it was a majority in your district that were say they were Muslim, that you were being forced to worship in the way that Muslims worship? And I think if we think from that perspective, we start to realize that the separation of church and state is good. It's very important that I believe very much in the teachings of Christ and the study of the gospel, and I'm a Christian. And like I think I told you, I was a teaching assistant for the Old Testament. I really think that we have to support our churches and our parents, and that I feel much more comfortable that they get their religious guidance from your home, from the home, and from the church. Because I think that those, I'm going to call it institutions, are much stronger and better at being able to do that. And in the schools, let's face it, we have like this much time, and we have to get all of this stuff into their little heads, and get them exposed and make sure that they can read and write and do arithmetic. And I really think that we should support our parents and what they do at home, but we need to keep those things kind of separate so that no one feels out of place. No one feels like they don't belong. Because as you are aware and I'm aware, in the teachings of Jesus, Jesus was not a judgmental person. Mm-hmm. And he never went to a person and condemned them and made them feel unworthy. He made every person feel worthy. And I somehow think in my mind that blends with American ideology, that we need to accept and love each other and learn from each other and support each other. And I feel that aligns with the teaching of Christ.
Good deal. All right, so that's actually the last real question. So just like everybody else, I want to give you a couple minutes to just kind of say what you'd like to hit on. If we didn't cover it, if there's something that you feel like you want to say, that we haven't talked about, here's your time to kind of say it.
Well, Chad, I think what I'd really like to do is I would like to ask, the voters to give me an opportunity. I'm running against two people that have had an opportunity, and I think that my unique combination of education and skills and background here has made it possible that I may be able to bring some things to the table that haven't been brought there before. And I do believe that I have a public servant's heart.
Right.
And I have always wanted to serve people, but mostly I wanted to serve the people here in Washington County.
Right.
Because I saw, firsthand, growing up, and even now since I've come back, how the hard life that a lot of people here have. And if there's anything that I can bring back and give as a gift that I've been blessed with, it's that knowledge and skills to make their life easier.
Right. Good deal. All right. Well, in closing, election's a month away, a month and a week, but
Boy, it is.
you can go ahead and vote early.
Yes.
It's at the register, or I always want to call it the registrar's office.
At the government center.
Government center.
At the government center.
So you can go and vote early if you would like to, and
it's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
okay.
You can go in, show your driver's license. They'll look you up, get you set up, and you can go in and vote. You also have the opportunity to bring in your absentees. If you requested absentee ballots, there's a drop box right there on the outside, or you can take it into the office and drop it there also.
Good deal.
This is a real exciting time. I'm exhausted as can be. It's like 7 days a week, which is wonderful. But Chad, every day I get up and I think about what I'm going to do that day, and I just take joy in it.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the process, both our life, get up every day and be thankful and grateful, to God that we have another day. But what I'm finding is the more that I get to interact one-on-one with people, the more it just solidifies exactly what I knew about people here in Washington County and Southwest Virginia.
Right.
And, I've traveled all over the world and all over this country. And every time I come back home to visit my mom and dad, I always say, gosh, the people there are so nice. And Chad, it is the truth. Some of the best people in the world are right here in Washington County.
I agree.
And I'm hoping that they honor me and give me an opportunity to serve them. And I think I will do them proud.
All right, guys, you've heard what she stands for. You've heard what she thinks, and actually more than what we really had intended on. But that's kind of why we do what we do, kind of freelance, just base questions to start out with. I want to thank you again for joining us. Please get out and vote. It is very important. If you like these videos, please like, subscribe, share them. Turn on those notifications, hit that bell so that you can set it up so that you know the next video is coming out, when it's coming out, and be more informed. Until next time, God bless and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.